You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And we are here to discuss our September 2023 book club pick, The Family Chao by Samantha Chang. As always, the Books and Boba podcast is supported by our listeners at patreon.com/booksandboba, where our listeners get access to our exclusive members-only Discord server, as well as our monthly bonus Boba Chat episodes. So if any of that sounds interesting, head on over and join our Patreon and help us better cover books by Asian and Asian American authors. But yeah, Rira, welcome to the end of September.
Yay, it's going to be the start of Spooky Month, my favorite month.
We're very excited. And man, this book, it turned out to be a lot more than I thought it would be. So I'm excited to kick off our discussion with you. I'm expecting a pretty good conversation. So we should just get started. As always, our book club discussions will cover the entire book, including any twists and reveals. And this book is kind of a murder mystery, especially in the latter half. So if you do care about being spoiled about that stuff, feel free to hit pause, go read the book, and then come back and listen to our discussion. But without further ado, let's get into it. Rira, can you start us off, as always, with the book description?
Okay. The residents of Haven, Wisconsin have dined on the fine Chao restaurant's delicious Americanized Chinese food for 35 years, happy to ignore any unsavory whispers about the family owners. But when brash, charismatic, and tyrannical patriarch Liu Chao is found dead, presumed murdered, his sons discover that they've drawn the exacting gaze of the entire town. The ensuing trial brings the light potential motives for all three brothers. Dago, the restaurant's reckless head chef, Ming, financially successful but personally tortured, and the youngest, gentle but lost college student, James.
I guess right off the bat, I wanted to get your hot take on how this book was for you, because I think for me, I was surprised at because based on that description, it was like, oh, this is going to be like a murder mystery exploring generational trauma. But then what we actually got was honestly a classic Asian American children of immigrant story, right? About immigrant parents and the number they do on their children.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how, you probably thought that this was going to be a cozy kind of like a cross between family drama and murder. But I heard that this book was a loosely inspired homage to Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And that is an 800-page book. And it is considered one of the most influential classics in world literature. So I was like, okay, we're probably going to go for something that's very dense, because the Brothers Karamazov is very philosophical. It goes into religion, and it is also a courtroom story. So I was expecting I had more reasonable expectations, should I say, but I have never read the Brothers Karamazov. So I honestly
it's 800 pages, yeah.
It's honestly I can't bring up any parallels, because I honestly have never read this book. I don't know much about it, but from the reviews that I've read, people are saying that Samantha Chang did a really good job kind of interweaving the original plot and characters, but giving it a very fresh Asian American feel to it. So, but I'm going to just trust those reviewers, because I have never read this book. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not an intellectual. I didn't take any literature classes in college.
Well, at least you were aware of it. Me, as a non-literary person at all, I'm oh, I guess that makes sense.
I mean, you picked it.
I did, but I picked it based on my own personal interests in A, Asian American stories, B, restaurant family stories, and C, Obama read it. So,
That's right. Obama did read it. It was on his reading list.
Yeah.
But important thing to know about Samantha Chang, the author. She is the first Asian American and first women director of the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is probably the most prolific writers program out there. Like, I feel like that program has produced more award-winning authors than any other MFA program out there. So quite impressive. This is her third.
I think it's her fourth novel, fifth book.
Yeah, she's written a lot of like short stories, but like Marvin said, I think this is like her fourth or fifth full length novel. So, and I also heard that like her previous books are quite downers. They're quite depressing. And Samantha Chang, she said in an interview how someone came up to her and was like, you're a really funny, like witty person. I'm surprised that like it doesn't come through in your writing, because like your previous books are very like dense and kind of depressing. So for this book, she inserted a lot of like humor into it, and I was like, yeah, okay.
I mean, there was a lot of humor, but it was still kind of a depressing read, in my opinion. Like, it's not exactly like a feel good story, right? Obviously, like Asian American family drama, there's a lot of like, I think the keyword is trauma to go around, right?
Yeah, a lot of trauma. But like I say humor as in, it's dark humor. It's kind of like you laugh, because if you're not laughing, you're crying.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, reading this book reminded me of the HBO series Succession. It's like it's essentially the story of Succession, of like a dirtbag father not really wanting to pass on his empire to his children, who are all kind of fail sons in some way, except like, about a crappy Chinese restaurant in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest, which goes to show you don't have to be a rich white corporate magnate to be like a tyrant to your family.
Oh, no. There's quite a number of tyrants under the patriarchy all across races and classes.
Yeah. So I guess to start off, I like the way that this book was separated, right? There's two like main parts, and they're labeled, they see themselves and the other see them. And at first I was wondering, is this about how the family sees themselves and the community sees them? But like after reading the whole book, it's really like the first half of the book, the part where they see themselves, takes place entirely in this Chinese enclave in Haven, Wisconsin, which is like a fictional Midwest city, and all about their internal conflicts with each other and like the drama. And then in the second part, where after the crime happens, after the murder happens, the world gets opened up to like the white gaze, and then you get to see like the other see them represents like how this community is represented to the rest of the world. And I did not expect like rep sweats to be such a theme in this book, right? Like how one person acts is how everyone will see them from now on. And that part was like, honestly, a little, not triggering, but definitely a little like affecting, right? Like that tension that we're all really, really familiar with.
Yeah, I really like the fact that the book was split into two parts, like you said. Part one is they see themselves, and part two is the world sees them. Personally, I liked part two more, but that's just because like I love the format that Lan went with like the blog posts and
yeah. How did you
like time skipping?
You are a former journalist, so what did you think about the whole like this is the format you have to like blog in, and then like the reveal at the end?
I've never really followed format, so also I didn't go to journalism school, so a lot of those rules just kind of like went over my head. But in part one, when Lynn, the student who is now taking journalism classes because she switched her majors from
data science,
her parents are like, I can't believe she switched majors. And then with her, she's like, I cannot believe I switched majors. Like, journalism is a lot harder than I thought. I'm not assertive enough. I don't know how to ask questions. Why did I change my major? And I like totally understood that level of anxiety, because as someone who went to school for creative writing, I thought that it was going to just be mostly me in a room writing by myself, maybe with other people. I don't have to talk to people. But as I accidentally stumbled into journalism, I had to develop those skills. And I was like, wow, yeah, like it's quite terrifying. And being a journalist is very difficult depending on the subject that you're writing. And especially with like courtroom coverage, you're not allowed to bring anything with you into a courtroom. And just like how she was writing this blog in like the format that her teacher was telling her to write in, like with bullet points, nothing should be longer than three lines for a paragraph. And I was just like, I didn't know that was real. I tend to write sparsely, so that kind of makes sense that I was fit for it.
Yeah, I mean that's how like Axios articles are, but Axios are meant to be like short form, like quick bites journalism. I did love the added detail at the end in the epilogue where she ended up getting a C for her assignment because she did not follow the correct format.
Follow directions. Yeah.
No, it's like, doesn't matter, man.
Listen, you can be a journalist without having a journalism degree. Like most journalists I've met didn't go to journalism school. They like accidentally stumbled upon it because they happened to be really into whatever subject that they're really into and are articulate. And that's how they got hired.
Yeah. So. And I guess that's kind of a smaller, like, I guess, microcosm of like the bit greater theme of the second part at the very least, which is fitting like the world trying to make you fit into the box they see you in, right? Like that's like a lot of the trial was about like the world seeing what it wants to see and like making you conform to their perception as opposed to like being yourself. So yeah, I like that as a additional like thematic flavor.
Yeah. And I like the fact that Ming and James, they find out about what was said in the trial in real time by reading Lynn's blog. And now it's just like, wow, this is just like when a hot mess is covered on Twitter and you're just like watching it be updated in real time.
Yeah. But I guess this is a good time to talk about the main cast of the book, which is the family Chao. And man, what a hot mess of a family, right? Like, do you want to start with the brothers or with the father?
Well, I guess we can start with the brothers. Do you have a favorite brother?
I mean, they all kind of suck in their own way. I do like James because he's the nicest one, although he's like almost fake nice sometimes, you know, like he
really gives me nice guy vibes.
Yeah, for sure. I relate to Dago, William, the oldest brother. Just as an eldest brother myself, I like can feel like his conflict. I've never wanted to murder my father, but definitely like the pressure of like wanting to succeed, having to move home, having to deal with like the shame of like not living up to your like golden boy status. I think that's something a lot of older sons, especially like millennial ones, can relate to.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I was thinking about you when I was reading this book. I was like, I wonder what Marvin thinks as someone who is the eldest son in an Asian American family. And, you know, I don't know his younger brother all that well. So I don't know I don't know if the sibling dynamic is like similar between brothers or not, but
it's a little different, I think, especially there's just only two of us, so there's no middle child. So there's no like middle child like dynamics there. The good thing is my father is not like a tyrannical man. He definitely does have like, he is strict, but he's not a narcissist like Leo Chao is. Like Leo Chao, like I feel like if he actually had power, would be a very scary man, you know? Like he definitely gave like Trumpy vibes.
Yeah, he definitely gave Godfather vibes too, you know? Like, not everything he does is above board.
Yeah. I feel like we can discuss that too. It's just like, as an immigrant, especially in a place where you are a minority, where you're already seen as like trash, like you do what you got to do to survive. And a lot of times that means a lot of stuff under the table. It's the reason why a lot of our collectively, not ours specifically, parents don't trust institutions. They don't put their money in banks. They don't pay. Like, there's so many restaurants in like the San Gabriel Valley who got in trouble because of under-the-table payments to their employees, and then getting hit with tax fraud because you're supposed to report everything you pay, right? Like, there's a reason why, like, when we hear stories like that, we're like, oh, we're not surprised, right? Like, of course they did that.
What's really interesting is from interviews that I've read with Leigh and Samantha Chang, some people had come up to her to complain about the Asian American portrayal in this book. I don't know if the actual reviewers were Asian American, but I'm guessing that there has to be some out there. But they were saying like, oh, these are stereotypical portrayals. You're putting them in like a very like negative light. Like, I don't understand why you wrote the characters to be so unlikable and crass and vulgar and pretty much sucking in everything. And I was like, well, like, it made me question the genre of immigrant fiction, you know? Because I feel like for a long time, in the beginning of like the first wave of Asian American writers, it was a lot about like generational trauma, being like a second gen and dealing with expectations, but
also like American dream, right? You're able to succeed because we sacrificed for you. We were hard on you because we wanted you to achieve the American dream. A lot of very like optimistic, aspirational stories about like families achieving their dreams through generational sacrifice, right?
Yeah, and I feel like with a lot of those books, the parents are kind of put on a pedestal because they're like, oh my God, my parents worked so hard and gave up everything for my life. And you know what? Like, true. But at the same time, your parents aren't saints. You know, they have their own baggage, their own trauma. And, you know, some of them are narcissists. My father is a narcissist. I've met other Asian parents who really treat their children as if they're just, I don't know, extensions of themselves, like pawns for their own ambitions.
Or like people you have power over, right? Because of established patriarchal Confucian like values. You're like, your children are yours to control and to direct, right? And they are there to take care of you in your old age. And there's a lot of people who do think like that, right? And you know, a lot of times when our parents when we have fight with our parents in like our adolescence, that's what they throw at us. It's like, I took care of you, I sacrificed for you. Your job is to take care of me in the future.
Yeah, and then my response to that is, I didn't ask to be born, and it is a privilege for you to be a parent. But that's neither here nor there. But talking about parents, you know, like Liu Chao is, you know, not really the typical Asian American immigrant father that we see in literature. He's very loud. He's very crass. He's you know, he's a womanizer. He doesn't really treat his sons all that well. And he's very selfish, even though he, you know, he has like put in efforts for his sons to succeed. It's not really for the sons' benefits, but more for his benefits, so that he has kind of like street cred, being like, oh, look at my sons. Like,
humble brag, like cred.
Yeah,
right?
humble brag. Like, oh, James goes to a good college trying to be like a doctor. Ming is really successful. And Dago, well, I guess he can cook. But, you know. Like,
I feel like humble is giving him too much credit. It's just bragging credit. He just wants to brag.
Bragging. We say humble bragging, but it's just like bragging. So he's a really different type of Chinese immigrant father that we've seen in literature. And same thing with Dago or William. He is not quite the golden eldest child in Asian families, which I really liked, because I feel like I feel like it's so common to see the eldest child be like the golden child. They go, like, they're high achievers. They have to make sure their parents' sacrifices are like worth it. And it was just really nice to see the oldest child kind of be a loser. And
a loser in the eyes of his dad, but like let's examine what his life was like, right? He decided to go into music because he didn't want to follow his father's path for him, and it didn't work out. And so, like many like millennial children of our generation, they move back home and like take over the family business. And but then the main difference here is that Leo is a piece of crap and won't let him live it down and uses this to exert his power over him because Leo is a narcissist who like revels in his ability to ruffle people's feathers, right? Like one of the main like characteristics of Leo Chao is that he will just say whatever he wants to get you to be mad. Like he wants to get a rise out of you, right? He'll eat meat at the vegetarian spiritual house. He'll like say the worst thing to you in public in front of other people. Like I feel like there's a certain type of like conservative Asian parent that he just embodies, right? Like he'll just say like the most like terrible things, whether or not he believes it or not, but because he knows he'll get you angry.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder if this book would have done well like 10 years ago, you know? Like I kind of consider this book to be like a post-immigrant story because like I feel like if it came out like 10, 15 years ago, people would be like, why? Like this is not how Asians are like because there was like so few representations, right?
Yeah.
So this representation really breaks the mold of model minority. Although we do have Ming, and he has a whole monologue about that, which we'll talk about later.
I mean, rep sweats, right? The term that Jenny Yang and Phil Yu coined at like a fresh out the boat screening before, like meaning that it's like people are so worried that because there's so few representation, this will make the whole community, like if it's bad, like it'll make the community look bad. That is like not only a theme of this book, but also like a meta theme, right? Because the book itself is about a bad immigrant, like a guy who like does cheat, does swindle, does like steamroll and like makes everyone's lives worse. Who's also like a Chinese immigrant bootstrapper who like made a life in this country. I feel like if this book did come out 10 years ago, it wouldn't have gotten as much praise because people would be like, why are you airing your dirty laundry? Why are you portraying us as bad? And so like an ongoing refrain in the book is also like the way the community sees the Chaos, right? Like the story about when Leo made a big fuss at a post office because he felt like he was being like looked down on. And then people like looking in saying, oh no, the Chaos are making the Chinese community look bad. And then later on, during the second half of the book, during the trial, the fact that like there was that one part where I think James is scrolling through the comments to one of Lynn's articles, and then you see like the comments, like everyone's focusing on the dog part, which we can talk about that as well. And then people are saying, "Oh, this is why like these people make Asian people look bad." I think it was really clever that Samantha Chang like wrote a book that also embodied like the theme that's within it, right? Like the fact that this book exists is also like part of the theme.
Yeah, I can definitely like the whole you're making Asians look bad. And I don't know, like this fear that just one bad person can undo years and years of progress. And it's just like, it's fake. That's what the model minority myth is built upon, you know? Like everybody has to be a good little immigrant, check all of the boxes in order for us to retain our privileges in this country. Otherwise, it'll be taken away at any moment. And that's something that like we've all been through. Yeah. And like, I mean, it probably is like much stronger because this takes place in Wisconsin, where there's a minority is like where Asians are a minority.
And that's something that I realized while reading this is just like, I can understand that conflict, but I honestly can't relate to it. Like Ming is such an interesting character because like I know people and I've read people who like thinks the way that he thinks and says things that he says. But like as someone who grew up in like the San Gabriel Valley, like I can't imagine what it's like to grow up like actively not wanting to be Chinese. or Asian, right? Like that thought process does not occur to me, like, and as I meet more people from those situations, I realize just what a privilege, like what a relief, like mental health relief it was to like grow up where I grew up, because like the idea that like you're actively just like suppressing like a big part of your identity, right, is it just feels very, very traumatic.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Wisconsin, the Midwest, they have like the largest population of Asian adoptees, which I always find really interesting. And just how like just thinking about how like these adoptees are in communities where, you know, most of the people there are white, your parents are most likely white. Like, what does that do to how you see yourself? And do you even consider yourself to be part of the Asian community when you are so alone in that aspect? And it's just interesting how it's not just a struggle that adoptees go through. It's a struggle that a lot of Asians go through in these white communities in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like, on paper, I should like Ming because he's the most independent thinking of the brothers, but I just I could not relate to his thought process at all. And like, I think part of me is like, I think people who think like him, like that kind of thinking, like the self-hatred, I think that's a trigger for me, because I'm like, oh, I can't, like, I felt actively bad reading his rants about like why he doesn't like to be home. And like when he was railing against Catherine, right, the ex-fiance of Dago, who is a Chinese adoptee, like it's just so like, I should like you because you're the smartest one, you're the one that got away, you're the one that thinks for yourself, but at the same time, do you really think for yourself? Like, I don't agree with like more than half the things he says.
Ming was probably my favorite brother out of the bunch. Because listen, I don't like anyone in this book. I honestly think everybody is kind of pathetic to a degree, and that's kind of why I like this book. But with Ming, I don't know, there was just like something about him that I really liked. Maybe it's his candor that I was like, yeah, like you're an asshole, and you know you're an asshole. You know that you hate yourself, and that is something that, you know, really affects how you see other people. And, you know, he's very self-aware, and I don't know, it just made him to be a more layered character, in my opinion, which is probably why I liked him most out of the three. And also, I guess I related to him in the way of like, oh, I don't want to be home. I want to be away from my family. And
yeah.
And it's just like, he's very aware of like the number that his dad did on his family, being like, oh my God, like he treated my mom so terribly. What kind of father cheats on his wife and takes his sons on errands where he is like, the point of it is him seeing his mistresses, and him realizing that his dad being like, oh, I fulfilled the American dream. Like I'm a big shot. But Ming's like, you know, your American dream was carried by your sons who had unpaid labor.
You sit on a throne of lies, is what he says.
You sit on a throne of lies. And I don't know, just like the fact that he is aware of that. And
that's
and just
true.
like his like independence, like I feel like I begrudgingly gave him my respect, being like, okay, you made it out.
But then did he? You know, he made it out. He's smart. He can see the big picture. But his big sin is he doesn't do anything about it. Right? He knows he has this problem. He doesn't advance. Right? He knows, like, he can foresee that like his dad is about to get murdered by someone, but he doesn't do anything. He lets it happen. Right? Like he escapes, but he doesn't really. Like he comes back.
I don't know if he actually knows that his dad is gonna foresee that his dad's gonna get murdered. Like, I feel like he knows that his dad will have his comeuppance, but I don't think he actually thinks he'll be murdered.
He feels and knows that the tensions are at a breaking point and something's going to happen that night. That's why he was in such a hurry to get it. That's how I read it, at least. Like he knew something was going down. He wanted to remove himself from the situation. And then later on, he realizes that he made a mistake, right, by leaving. And that's kind of like, I like that the resolution of this book is not a clean resolution. It's everyone's acceptance that they're all complicit in this like messed up version of the immigrant dream, right? Like they're all like, it originated from Leo and his greed and his like malice, really, but they're all complicit in like the results, in the consequences, because they're all part of Leo's American dream.
Yeah, yeah. And I think another reason why I really liked Ming was his relationship with Dago, like that, jealousy. You know, it's like, oh, you're the eldest son. You always like had. I mean, you had a lot of pressure, but you also had like our parents' full attention, and it felt like me as a second son, like they didn't really care all that much, even though I am more capable, more intelligent, and
it's a very second son like.
It's a very
conflict.
second son, second sibling type of mindset.
Yeah, I was also like at first kind of confused about the Dago nickname or naming convention, because Samantha Chang doesn't really explain upfront what all the nicknames mean. And so me as a Chinese speaker was thinking, is this just a mistranslation, or like is this like a term of endearment that derived from, because Dago means big dog, but Daga means big brother. So I thought maybe it's like a mispronunciation that they just stuck. But then later on, they reveal that all three of the Chao sons, their nicknames, their tiers, their pet names are literally big dog, second dog, third dog. And I thought that was pretty messed up, because like,
it's like, wow, they love their sons so much by naming them in that manner.
Because that's not a common thing, you know, like Chinese families do give like, you know, naming conventions to their nicknames to their children. And sometimes a lot of times they're like cute, or they're, you know, they're clever. But go like dog means the same thing in Chinese as it does in like English. It's not exactly a term of endearment. It's a term of ownership. So like just knowing that, you kind of realize what kind of person Liu Chao is.
Yeah. And speaking of dogs, we have Alf. The family dog.
It's a Frenchie, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. So
Frenchies
cute.
are cute. What is so? Did you think they ate Alf? Like I was like, there's no way.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. So like, what happens in what happens is that they're at this Christmas party, and obviously Dago wants to show off that he is, you know, he's
The
a
top
big
chef.
man,
Yeah.
top chef. He can spend lavishly, so he has all of these dishes, and he happened to get a mutton from the Scar family,
Who are like they're like restaurant rivals, right? They run
restaurant rivals, and also like their family like racist bullies from like grade school. So not great people, but they give him a mutton, and he makes like a really delicious stew out of it. Red stew out of it. And as was it Brenda who brought her? Like,
Brenda,
guest?
who is Dago's new flame. She brought her high school ex, who was like the former quarterback, who like that guy sucked. Like he was just like, I've known people like that, like white guys who are dating like a friend, and we bring them to like dim sum, and he spends the entire time just like asking what everything is and being super picky. I'm like, then why do you come if you're gonna be like this?
But also, like, it's Wisconsin, so I'm like, I will give them a free pass. But anyway, he's
no
eating
free passes. I refuse.
I'm a little bit more generous with my passes, but he's eating the mutton. That's probably like the thing that he eats the most. And Feng, who is
Family friend,
as a family friend of the Chao, he makes a joke saying like, "Oh, it's dog meat."
Yeah.
And then it just spirals out of control from there.
And then that becomes a rumor online that like they cooked the family dog, and like it's so like it was depressing and sad, but also kind of like you said, like funny in a black comedy kind of way, that they might have,
of course,
they might have eaten their dog becomes the main narrative of Dago's trial. And like, of course, like all these white people care because now it involves a puppy.
Yeah, Alf becomes a symbol for anti-Asian sentiments, and I like, you know, I find it like hilarious. I mean, in a black comedy kind of way. It's like, oh wow, they care about a dog more than an actual human being. Like white people care more about their pets than
Yeah. If there
people
was,
of color.
yeah. I mean, honestly, if the Alf component wasn't there, no one would care about this case about like a patriarch of a restaurant family who is found dead in his freezer, right?
Yeah, and like for a brief second, I did believe it that Alf was eaten because Alf goes missing, and
Yeah.
it was the Scar family who gave the mutton. But in my head, I'm like, oh, but they're white though. Would they kill a dog? And I was like, I feel like they won't.
Well, also, like, Dago is like a top chef. Like, he can recognize mutton from like dog meat for sure. Like, he can recognize like this is not like, if it wasn't actual mutton, I think he would have recognized it. Like, he's in my head, just didn't compute, and just like these people are just being stupid.
And like if you are an Asian growing up in a community where there are a lot of racists, I feel like that's their go-to joke, being like, oh, your people eat dogs. And I'm just like, wow, like so original. Like, thanks.
Yeah.
It's not like Americans don't eat gross things.
Shall we go
either.
into the history of socioeconomic oppression of Asia in like,
Have you starved before? I mean, like there are people in America who eat squirrels, and that's a rodent. I just thought the whole thing was funny with Alf, and to be honest, I thought maybe it was a plant by the prosecutors.
yeah, I mean, definitely they,
Play it up to like drum
Yeah.
up support. So I was like, like I feel like if I was a prosecutor, I would use that, but
yeah.
that's just me being cynical.
That does remind me of like there's this it's an early chapter where they're describing the early days of the restaurant. Lan describes Winnie and Leo's notes to each other about white people's food preferences.
Oh yeah.
And like this is the history of Americanized Chinese food, which is these people apparently love chop suey. What the hell is that? I don't know, just throw whatever in it.
And also like, oh, they love chicken wings. Oh, they love anything that is like deep fried or or like drenched in sauce and oil.
Yeah. It is a book about Chinese restaurant families, so there was plenty of food. And I did like it was kind of interesting the way that Lan, Samantha, Chang describe like the proper nouns of the foods, right? Because there's a vegetable that they mentioned a few times. They called it hollow heart greens, which as a Chinese speaker, I know exactly what that is. That's kongxing cai, which literally translates to hollow heart greens. But I don't think that's the actual like English term for it.
Probably not.
Yeah. In English, it's water spinach.
Ah, okay. That makes sense because I had no idea what it was until you just translated it to water spinach. I was like, oh, I know what that is. Okay. That's
Yeah.
interesting. As someone who is not a Chinese speaker, I'm like,
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. It's some kind of vegetable. Like,
Yeah. I did like the portrayal of the community in this book. And the fact that this restaurant is kind of the heart of the community, which is how like the community members were able to overlook Leo's like shittiness because he also provides them like a haven within haven, right? For them to be like a community.
I mean, this reminds me of, I mean, this is kind of like a sidebar, but I saw a TikTok of someone who was like in the Midwest. I think they were like from Wisconsin. And they said, to all the Asians who just move here in the middle of nowhere, setting up their Chinese buffets and their takeout restaurants, God bless you. You're bringing taste to our poor white communities. And
Yeah.
it just like made me laugh so hard because it's just like, wow, you guys must be so desperate for like anything other than what you are eating right now.
I think I would have patronized the Scares shitty diner. Like everyone needs a shitty diner in their town that can serve you like decent eggs and like apparently a really tasty fish sandwich.
One of my favorite scenes was the diner scene with Ming and James. Like Ming goes on that really long monologue,
stream of consciousness, like rant
about like how racist the town is, how like, you know, the only way he could leave was through, you know, through like money, pretty much. He was like, I need to get good grades, to go to a good school, to get money, because money is power, money is love. And this is the only thing that people this is the only way that people will respect us, because the American dream is only accessible to the people who are white by default. So I thought that was like, it was a stream of consciousness. And in the beginning, when I was reading that scene, I was like, oh my God, he's like talking so much. It's pretty much a monologue. Who monologues / rants like this in real person? And then I remembered that Ming hadn't slept in a really long time, and he had just been like drinking cup after cup of coffee. He was just like caffeine to like the brim. And I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense. He's kind of like a crazy person right now.
Right. And I mean, on that note, it kind of makes sense later on when he is like, you never know what he's diagnosed with, but it sounds like he, like, at this point, he was like kind of being manic, right? Like he definitely has some sort of like mental health issue. And I think that's like a running theme. Like at the beginning of the book, they all go to this luncheon at the spiritual house, which is like this. I still can't tell if it's like a real Buddhist institution or like just one of those immigrant, like kind of, there's a spiritual leader here and it's like they're practicing their own version of Buddhism, which is something that totally happens. Like I've followed my parents to one of those meetings before. They didn't stay, but it was definitely like those vibes. And then the sister there, the head nun, Guling Zuci, she tells him like you're sick, you have a sickness, you need to take care of that. And throughout the entire story, I thought, is it cancer? Like I was thinking like a physical sickness. Like the fact that it was a mental issue didn't even occur to me till they like spelled it out.
Yeah. I mean, I say crazy in, like not as a derogatory term, but
yeah,
he was ranting and he was raving,
yeah.
and just, I don't know, like that scene was one of the scenes that like jumped out the most to me in this book. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what this book is about. This is what Samantha Chang is trying to say about Asian American representation in this country. And and I really liked Ming's dynamic with Catherine, because Catherine, like we mentioned, is a Chinese adoptee. And while reading this, readers will be like, why is she with Dago? Like he has no money. Like his dad is probably not going to give him his promised share of the restaurant. She's a successful lawyer in Chicago. Why has she clung to this relationship so hard for 12 years? And it's just, like, I think it's really interesting how, like, Ming kind of gets it. Ming's just like, you grew up in a white community and you've kind of, like, latched onto us because we're, like, the closest thing to, like, your Chinese heritage. And you've kind of, like, fetishized us. And I find that to be really pathetic. You should just leave us and move on because you have reached success. And I don't know, like Catherine was a very interesting character to me. I felt really bad for her.
Yeah.
But
I
also
mean, she
at
could
the
have
same time,
found anyone to like kind of project her need for community with, and it just happened to be like the worst possible family for her.
Yeah. I mean, I was just like, out of the three brothers, Dago, him, like, I feel like you should have like gone with Ming, but Ming has his own problems.
I mean, it feels like she stayed for Winnie.
Yeah, she stayed for Winnie.
Yeah, not like Dago was just like the conduit for it.
But girl, you do not need to be engaged to Dago to have a relationship with Winnie.
And here's like at the end, like they're saying, oh yeah, Brenda was saying how like Catherine should just hook up with me because they sue each other more. I'm like, no, don't hook up with anyone in this family anymore. Go find some like nice like other like. Go find like
you work in Chicago.
Go find
man.
like a Chicago
there
transplant.
To be some Asians.
Yeah,
there.
Go find a transplant that came here from like L.A. or San Francisco, somewhere where
New
they
York.
can give you,
yeah,
or someone who can like provide a more healthy mindset to model after, right? I'm firmly in the camp that I'm sure there's a lot of mean Catherine shippers out there. I am not one of them.
I mean, it's so funny to me that everyone would say, "Oh, Doggo, the best thing that's ever happened to you is Catherine." And whenever anyone says that to someone, like, "Oh, the best thing that's ever happened to you is,
Your
you finding
partner.
your partner,"
Yeah.
that's a red flag. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Catherine definitely like I liked her, but she also gave like just like the vibes were a little off with just how much she was clinging to that family. Like,
Oh,
and
yeah.
everyone was like, "There's no reason for this." Like,
It's like, I mean, Ming is right, but he didn't have to put it in such brutal way. Obviously, Catherine, I feel like she is like a good person because she does help out with Doggo's trial and she does care for Winnie quite a lot. So I feel like she is a kind person, but there is like an offness to it. There's like a performance aspect to it. And
yeah, I mean,
like comparing her to Brenda too, I think that's really interesting because Doggo left Catherine for a white woman who wants to marry rich, and Doggo is like, he's using his life savings and using the money that Catherine lent him to like get this penthouse. I'm like, what? Like, what are these decisions you are making, sir?
yeah, it's like temperamentally they suit each other, but in terms of like the things that he does to like pursue her, and the thing is he probably didn't even need to do all those things, right? Like she ends up like falling for him because of like how much he is devoted to her, right? I'm sure there's like an allegory there for like how like certain Asian men bend over backwards to like
to get like to get like a white woman,
Yeah.
because a white woman is considered to be like the
Success.
unreachable success for Asian men.
Yeah.
Because in this country, like there's like a hierarchy when it comes to desirability. Because like getting with a white woman means you're closer to the hierarchy of whiteness,
Yeah.
which means success. So
But at the same time, like he's never portrayed as like vocalizing those specific, like that's something that like Ming might say, and there's something like Ming I think does say, like maybe indirectly, than the fact that he's never dated an Asian woman, right? Because he doesn't want to date someone that's like his mother, and to him, all Asian women are his mother.
yeah, and also like in part two, the world sees them. That's what people see. They're like, oh, Doggo left his Asian fiance for this white lady. Like, surely she must have like seduced him, and surely he must like be dating her just because she's white. And I love
And surely
how like
she's dating him just because she thinks he has money.
yeah. So like, I really like the optics that
Yeah.
Samantha Chang like put into like the courtroom scenes, and just how like the defense and prosecutor would just try to paint the immigrant experience in a way where it would benefit their client. And I don't know, it just like it just reminded me of how like we are seen in by the public,
Yeah, when in reality, like their relationship is maybe closer to James and Alice's, which is they were acquaintances when they were young. They're just townies that like finding comfort in each other, right? I don't like personally. I didn't get the the aspirational nature of him wanting Brenda, as opposed to like he just felt like they got along better than what he did. What he
same
had
here.
with Catherine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you think
did
of
you-
James and Alice, by the way?
I was going to ask you that. What did you think about James and Alice? I
It
think
was
you
like-
can guess what my opinion is.
I mean, it would be sweet if like we didn't get all the icky parts of James's own like horn dog nature, right?
Oh, God. How old is he? Like 19?
Yeah, like he just finished his first year in college.
But then I think that is an accurate portrayal of just like young Asian men who, haven't really had the opportunity to date and comes from a very like conservative family where you can't really go out and do things on your own.
I guess, but that first scene when he like goes in the bathroom to take care
that
of
was
himself,
so gross.
He was
I
in
was
the
like, what the
church. That's like a temple he's in when that's happening.
I was like, really? Do you really have to wank one out right now? Right now? I feel like you would be able to put your dick down like without like I feel like there wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah, I mean that's how you
there
know
was-
he is Leo Chao's son.
Oh God, so gross. Yeah, I found a lot of the sex stuff to be quite crass, and I'm pretty sure that's what Samantha Chang was going for. One part that I really like, that I felt really grossed out by, was a flashback of James and Alice. They're like, what, like in middle school, and
Oh, she
he, like,
showed, yeah.
when like he sees like her nipple, and he's like, I want to see it again. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, first off, why is Alice like showing that to him? And I just felt really ick about the whole thing. And it made me wonder, like, did this have to be in here? I feel like maybe just one awkward sex scene with James was enough.
I think it was. I mean, it's to illustrate that Alice was James's like sexual awakening, right? So that's why he's like hasn't been able to forget her. I thought like it was ick. It was kind of like the whole relationship was a little like the vibes were definitely off, but not unbelievable, right? Like he is still the age.
I mean, the fact
where
that
he
it
believes
wasn't unbelievable made it gross, you know, because if it. Because it's like, oh, I can name a couple of Asian guys off the top of my head who probably were like James when they were younger. So
I want to say like most boys probably. I don't
most
know.
boys,
if they had the chance to see a boob, they would want to see a boob.
Oh, so gross, so gross. And like the fact that like, you know, they were like kissing and he just like came in his underwear. I'm like,
that part was like, oh,
I was like,
bro.
I was like, what? Like, is this necessary? We already got a scene of him jacking off in the bathroom after like one interaction with her. Like, I feel like we did not need another one of these scenes.
I thought that was pretty funny. I was laughing. You dummy. Something that I want to point out is, I'm sure this was intentional, naming the family the Chao family, because the entire time I was reading the book, I would often misread the Chaos with chaos.
Chaos, yeah, same here.
Yeah.
I thought that was really clever. But I wanted to bring up another female character, Olen, who is one of the restaurant workers at the Chao family's restaurant and has been there for quite a while, does not speak English, and, you know, like she is undocumented, and that is being taken advantage of by the Chao family.
This reveal, I was shocked when they like pulled the mask off of Oolong. Where,
oh, really?
Like, yeah, like like because for most of the book, for most of the first half of the book, the way they see themselves, like she is like kind of a background character, right? She's like making small talk, kind of like speaking Chinese, like kind of, she's just in any like restaurant story, there's always like the crew, right? The people that work in the restaurant, they're in the background, that are just there. They're like, they're workers, they're lifers, and they're there for flavor, but they're not like part of like, and I should have known because this is a half murder mystery. And it's always the person you least expect.
I was about to say, Marvin, like, how did you not see, like, because I knew that it was going to turn into murder. I'm like, okay, I'm guessing it's going to be Olen, who is the most unassuming character. We don't really know much about her. And the whole fact that she doesn't speak English, I feel like that is like a facade, because that's a card that a lot of immigrants use in this country.
Obviously, the 6 years that we've read mystery together, I have not learned a thing, because I was like, I think I was so involved in like the Asian American immigrant storyline that I kind of forgot about like, oh, there's going to be a murder mystery later on, because I also did not expect the murder to not take place until halfway through the book.
Yeah, that's true. I did not expect it to happen so late in the book, especially when you read the book jacket description. You're like, oh, he gets murdered. And the entire time you're like, when is he getting murdered? And of course, like the seeds are like sprinkled throughout, because Dago, like on his illegal radio show, he talks about his daydream of killing his father.
Like his murder plan, like his very viable murder plan.
His very viable murder plan of locking his father in the freezer, which is like out of, you know, which is
not to code. Yeah.
Not up to code. And the only way to get out of the freezer is to use the key, which is like inside.
Yeah.
It's like, as long as if I just take the key and, you know, he's not watching and just close the door, he could just freeze to death. And, you know, because of that, a lot of people think that Dago is the killer.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, he broadcasted it to so many people. And also it's very easy to just Like, I feel like that is a very obvious way to kill Leo. It
Yeah.
doesn't really
And they kind of
require a lot of planning.
and Len, she plants a lot of seeds, right? All like maybe not James, but Ming and Dago have understandable reasons for wanting their father dead. Winnie definitely has reasons, like the mother. And then what I was on this path because they mentioned that Winnie was going to leave all of her possessions to the spiritual house. And so I was like, what if it's the nun? What if like the nun is the one that killed Leo? Because they know that like the money's gonna go to them, like his fortune's gonna go to them if he dies. Like I was on that path.
Also, there's like the not really a red herring, but you have like the subplot of the man that James saves in the beginning of this novel. He does CPR, not saves.
He helps. He doesn't
helps.
save.
Yeah. So, like in the first chapter of this book, James is at the subway station, and an elder Chinese man tries to communicate with him, shows an address, but then he suddenly falls down the stairs, and James attempts to do CPR, is unable to resuscitate him, and he gets taken away by EMT. And he realizes that the old man's bag was not carried out with the paramedics. So in his mind, he's like, okay, I'll just, mail it to him since I like saw the address that he was trying to show it to me. And little does he know that the man's entire life savings is in that blue carpet bag. And he puts it in his dad's truck. In the trunk of his car.
I think it was a Taurus, so it's a sedan.
Okay, a sedan.
Tiny sedan.
I thought it was a truck, but maybe it's because I'm like, it's in the Midwest, and because there's so much snow, like it makes sense to have a truck. Anyway, like his family finds out that this man had like a shit ton of money in this carpet bag.
Well, they assume because the family's looking for it.
Yeah. So that's like a red herring in the book because it's like, oh, what if it's, a
Motive,
relative?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to me, I was like, that's too convoluted. It has to be simpler than that. You can tell that I have watched a lot of murder movies and documentaries and read a lot of murder mysteries because the fact that I like guessed it within like the first couple chapters, I don't know. But Olin is a very interesting character.
She is. She's eventually revealed to be the killer, and also the brother's half sister from a previous relationship where Leo screwed her mother, took her life savings to buy passage to come to America to start his new life, which is to say, Leo has been a piece of shit his entire life and leaves a trail of destruction wherever he goes. And then so you find out that she's here specifically so that she can take revenge on Leo.
I thought it was really funny how he knew that she was his daughter. Because Guiling Jushir, the abbess, she like reintroduces both of them. It's like, oh, if she works for you, then she's able to, make money and stay in this country. And also you can get to know your daughter and, heal this animosity between you two. But obviously Leo is a piece of shit. And Olan is just like, nah, I think I'm going to hold on to my revenge plans. And I'm like, respect.
Yeah. I feel like Guling was also kind of helping Olan in her plot. I think that's why I remember during the luncheon, she was telling James to stay away from the restaurant for a few days. You're involved in a story that does not involve you, and if you get involved, you're gonna get screwed. Because I think she knows that Olan is about to execute her plot.
Yeah, I mean, I felt a little bit bad for James, even though I really didn't like him because of his nice guy vibes, because he's really clueless when it comes to his family. He really wants to. He really is a people pleaser. He wants like the family to get along. He looks up to Dago.
But he's still so inept at it, right? Because like, to be honest, like, because if you look at it, a lot of the things that happen wouldn't have happened if he just like did what he was supposed to do or didn't do what he did, right? Like if he didn't take the old man's luggage, then that wouldn't have been crucial evidence in his brother's case. If he had just looked for the bag when he was told to by his brother, it wouldn't have been lost, right? Like there's a lot of things, but instead he was like kind of following his dick, and that resulted in like consequences later on.
And it also like reminded me how like the whole saying of, oh, with each kid they have a different set of parents, which is so true, because your parents have like each of your siblings at a different point in life. They can be like young adults, and they can be a weathered couple who don't really like each other anymore, but they decide to have a kid because that's just something that happens. And I feel like with James, he really was like this. I mean, there's no proof of it, but he kind of seemed like a last ditch effort to save this family.
Well, what did you think of his decision to let Olan walk?
I mean, I was saying hooray because I was cheering for Olan. Maybe that makes me a terrible person. But I really like the line where he says, nothing is worse than being the daughter of Liu Chao. And I'm like, you're right. You're right. As shitty as you three had it as his sons, being like an illegitimate daughter, I guess, I don't know. Like, it was before he married Winnie. So I guess, like,
the way she says it, she was legitimate, but then he left and like,
yeah, it's like, oh yeah, because she's like, I don't think he would have left behind a son. So it's just like, yeah, this daughter who like got, who was robbed of everything. Like, I feel like she deserves to walk off. And the fact that he knew that, I was like, okay, good on you, James.
I thought it was also interesting that like the moment that he realized that she was his older sister, it was game over for him, because he was raised to be the obedient youngest son. And so there was no way he would be able to go against an older sibling, like at all, right? That's to his character. And so the moment he learned that, like, she was already free, and she knew it too. She knew like there's no way her like little brother could go against her. And I also, it was interesting how like once again Ming knew everything, but decided to like pass off the responsibility to someone else, right? Like Ming could have stopped her. Ming could have like,
okay,
called it in.
To be fair, Ming was off his rocker because he collapsed. He was at the hospital. Like, I think James made the right decision to leave him in the hospital, because who knows what Ming would have gotten into.
Yeah.
I will say so like I half read this book on audiobook, and Brian Nishili was the narrator, and he did a phenomenal job with all of the characters. He had different voices for each one. And when it was revealed that Olen could speak English, like he switched to Commonwealth Singaporean English. And I was like, whoa, he can do the accent. That's so cool. So it made the reveal like much more dramatic, just like listening to it.
It was a very like, I want to see this in like film form when she like turns on her like Kaiser Soze like switch and like becomes like a whole like eloquent English speaker.
Yeah. Like, oh, she can't. It's like, oh, she doesn't know English, and then she pulls off the most posh English accent possible.
It's definitely like it's definitely a play on like when, I don't know if you've been through this, but like when like Chinese people try to speak Chinese in front of me because they think I can't understand because I'm ABC, I'm like, no, I can totally understand everything you're saying.
Yeah, I mean that was also like a good character trait between like the brothers. So James doesn't know any Mandarin, maybe like very, very basic Mandarin. And then Ming is fluent. He's kept up with his Mandarin because like in college, he took college level Mandarin classes. I don't know how fluent Dago is, but fluent enough to understand. So I thought that was
typically is most fluent because they probably use the most Chinese at home too. Yeah.
So I thought that was like a really good detail among like the three brothers, because language is so private, and like fluency, like that depends on your relationship with your parents.
Yeah, and it's also it also makes sense because like especially with like bigger families, like the younger siblings are typically raised more by their older siblings than by their parents at that point.
Yup.
Yeah. What did you think about the resolution of Dago's case? Were you expecting him to get off, or did it go as
Oh
you
no, he
expected?
was 100% going to jail. Like again, I'm very cynical. So anytime a person of color is on trial and the prosecution is trying to paint them as, as evil, like out because like the way that they were painting Dago is like, oh, he's an unfilial son. Like his dad like sacrificed everything for him. He's ungrateful. And he's like a bad immigrant. Look at his skin tone. He's darker than other good Asians. And I'm like, oh my God. Like they're
Yeah.
going through all of the tricks. There's no way he's going to get off.
And the fact that the entire jury was white too.
Oh yeah, that too. And they're from the same town. I'm like, I feel like they should have, there has to be some kind of rule about that. Because if everybody knows each other in town, then obviously you're going to have a bias. But the moment Dago went to go testify, I was like, no, it's game over. There's no fucking way. Like, this guy is too impulsive. Everybody's telling him, you can't testify. You're going to just talk yourself into a grave. Like, what the hell? And sure enough, like he gets very emotional. He says, yeah, I thought about killing my dad. This is a recurring dream that I had because my dad is shitty and I have trauma, but it doesn't mean that I actually went through with it. And I'm also like a coward. There's no way I can do that to my father. I just like can't do it. But I'm like, you just said this to how many people in court that you thought about killing your dad? How many times?
It was pretty
often?
ill-advised. And as much as I liked his speech and I thought it was very heartfelt and emotional, it was also like a very bad decision to do that in court.
Yeah. And was it Lynn in her blog post who was like, oh, will they let the heartfelt Asian free? And I'm like, no, absolutely fucking not. Like, it's not going to happen. Yeah, like the actual quote was, will the jury believe a flawed but heartfelt Asian man? I'm like, when has the court ever sided with a person of color?
Yeah.
And this had so much like circumstantial evidence. I'm like, there's like the fact that it could even be on trial. I was like, wow, okay.
I feel like it was over the moment that the potential eating of a dog became the main storyline. Right, because they're like, oh, the courtroom erupted in cheers. Like, who's cheering for justice for Leo Chao? No, they're cheering for justice for Alf. But Alf wasn't even dead, you idiots.
Yeah, Alf was adopted by the racist family.
All right.
Yeah, but reading all of the bullying flashbacks, I will say it was a little bit triggering. Like, I haven't dealt with like racist bullying growing up. Actually, most of my bullying were by other Korean Americans, funnily enough. But I'm sure it is like a common experience that happens to people who are marginalized in white
especially if you're growing up as the only or one of the only Asian faces in like a town. Like when you're young, like differences is reason enough to bully someone.
Yeah, and like the fact that the bullying was like so harsh, like it wasn't even just physical. I mean, physical bullying is also bad, but the fact that they were like throwing all these slurs so casually. I was like, oh man, like even though I didn't have this experience, like it really did hit, Yeah. And it did make me wonder, I was like, is this how like Midwest Asian Americans feel? Cause we talked about this before on this podcast, like how East Coast Asians, West Coast Asians, and Midwest Asians are like all very different.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, and they also portray that in the book, right? Like, because there's the two scare cousins who moved up from Houston who are like totally down for Chinese food and okay with working at the Chinese restaurant. And I'm like, it's all nurture, right? It's not nature. It's definitely nurture. Like if you grew up.
I mean, no one comes out of the womb being like, I hate Asian people. That's just not something that happens.
Yeah.
But, I'm really glad that we read this now and not like when it when it came out. It came out in like early 2022, if I'm correct. But like with, all of the anti-Asian attacks during like the middle of the pandemic, I think this would have been really hard for me to read. But it's nice to have like a bit of, distance, even though those attacks are still happening, but with less frequency.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I thought it was witty and entertaining. Like I said, I'm pretty cynical. I like dark comedy, so I did find it pretty funny.
Yeah. We talked about all the members of the family except for the mother, Winnie. Do you have any thoughts on Winnie? I feel like she's a central part of the story, but she was also kind of barely there, right?
I know that some of the complaints that I have read have been like, oh, Winnie, how could she leave behind her family like that? And this is why I think this is kind of like a post-immigrant novel, because we're so used to seeing the Chinese
stand by your
immigrant
man,
mom,
like
stand by
duty,
your man, swallow all of the abuse, like you
Pride
do
is more
everything for your
important
sons.
than safety.
And then with her, she was like, as soon as James went to college, she's like, I'm out. Like, I was like, respect, like, do you? I mean, your sons are grown; they can make their own decisions.
Yeah.
So I really liked her decision to, be a nun and
I also
forfeit
definitely
all her possessions.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely also like understand her decision. Like, I did not fault her for leaving this terrible man and like extricating herself from this terrible situation. Like, I'm sure her life at she was still plagued with worry for her sons, and for some reason, still really cared about her husband. But I'm sure her life at the temple, at the spiritual house, was way more peaceful than at home.
Yeah. I mean, having a husband like Leo Chao it's not a fate that I would, want for anyone. And to the people who say, oh, well, Asian immigrant mothers would like never do that. I know a couple of Asian immigrant moms who have said goodbye as soon as their kids went to college. It's actually a much more common experience than you think.
Yeah, definitely. We should wrap up our discussion. Any final thoughts on the family Chao?
Well, I kind of want to read the Brothers Karamazov because I want to see like how Samantha Chang like did parallels to all the characters.
Is there like a movie I can watch instead? Like,
I'm sure there is, because this book came out like a long time ago. I'm sure it's been adapted a couple of times, but I don't know. Like, I am curious, but do I have time? That's the question. Do we have time?
That's true.
Although, like, I feel like Russian literature also has like that dark humor, so maybe I'll enjoy it.
Aren't they super dense though? I hear they're like very like dense in like prose and content and page length.
Yeah, I've only read Russian plays, so those actually have like a limit on the page count. But when it comes to novels, no, they really don't hold back on their length. So,
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed this book too. It definitely, it'd be cool to see this in classrooms too, as like a companion to other classics like Joy Luck Club and those other immigrant stories, because I think it is important to see like more sides to like the Asian immigrant story, not just like portrayals of Bay Area families or LA families or New York families, but also Midwest families, and like the different ways that like immigration can mess people up.
Yeah. I think it would be an interesting combo, the Joy Luck Club and the family Chao, because you have mothers and daughters and like the immigrant strife and kind of have like the generational trauma in a very like melodrama way, and then you have the family Chao where it's father and sons and people being shitty and it's like very crass, and I'm like, it's two sides of like the same like two sides of the Asian American experience, and I feel like it would be a very interesting syllabus for.
And I think and definitely like a good way, like in the future, when I recommend this book to people, I'm just going to tell them it's like Chinese Succession. If you like Succession, you'll probably like the vibes that this book
It's like
puts out.
Chinese Succession, but like in a small town with a small family business.
All right. I guess on that note, that'll do it for our discussion of The Family Chao by Samantha Chang. If you have any thoughts on our discussion or would like to give your own feedback on the book, please let us know either on Goodreads or if you are a Patreon subscriber on our Discord server. As always, we'd love to hear what you think about our episodes and our discussion. And with September out of the way, it's now time for Spooky Month 2023. And for this Spooky Month, we open it up to our Patreon listeners to let us know what they think we should read for October. And we had a lot of really great suggestions and came up with our choice. So Rira, why don't you tell us what we are reading for October 2023?
Yeah, we are reading Natural Beauty by Ling Huang, and it is a horror, contemporary / queer novel. And it's about a young musician who enters an elite beauty-obsessed world where perfection comes at a staggering cost. So this is going to be a book about, I guess, the horrors of the cosmetic. I guess this is going to be a book about like the dark side of cosmetic surgery and just like the price of beauty and consumerism and self-worth. So I think it'll be a very fitting read for Spooky Month.
Yeah, very Asian.
Yeah, very Asian.
A very Asian horror.
I hope it's
setup.
not too gory though. I honestly like have a hard time reading scenes where there's like surgery and blood, but I will do my best.
Yeah, thank you to Patreon subscriber Jennifer Hatfield for suggesting this book to us. We're looking forward to
it's a new book too. It came out earlier this year. It came out in April.
Yeah, looking forward to reading that. Looking forward to the creepy vibes. But with that, thank you so much for listening to our discussion of The Family Chao by Samantha Chang. We'll see y'all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Charlene Kay. I'm a musician, songwriter, and guitarist. Growing up, I loved music. Whether it was pop, acoustic, emo, I ate it all up. But as a Chinese American kid living in Scottsdale, Arizona, I also felt isolated, never really seeing artists who looked like me or shared my experiences. So, after years of performing on stages all over the world, I wanted to create a space to highlight the amazing Asian musicians who I knew were out there, just not always getting played on the radio. That's why I started Golden Hour, a podcast where Asian singers, songwriters, instrumentalists, and music producers share their personal stories, and it's a space for you to discover your new favorite artist. Listen to Golden Hour with me, Charlene Kay, wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Potluck Podcast Collective.